The House of Representatives at this time is an unsafe place for children and other living things. We've had a shutdown of government. We have not passed immigration. We have not passed the Voting Rights Act.
You know, I knew things were bad in Washington, and I knew things might have been kind of rough and tumble in the House, but it's not safe for children or living things, so I couldn't take my dog. I couldn't take my parakeet. Maybe the parakeet, because it would just yelp like all of them and no one would notice. But that's exactly the take that Democrats had this week on Eric Cantor's defeat. Remember, they hated Eric Cantor before, so I guess now they feel kind of sorry for him and think that it's even worse now. But listen to what the White House Deputy Press Secretary had to say about this, quoting here: "This outcome does provide some evidence to indicate that the strategy of opposing nearly everything and supporting hardly anything is not just a bad governing strategy, it's not a very good political strategy either." So I think what he's saying, Chad Pergram, our Capitol Hill senior producer, is that Eric Cantor had this coming. Am I hearing that right?
Well, that's one thing that you're hearing from the Democrats, but when you get down to the granular level here about what really went on this race, Tip O'Neill always said that all politics is local. And Democrats are kind of reveling in this, having defeated Eric Cantor. You know, there was this Broadway musical a few years ago, Avenue Q, and there's a song in that show called Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is happiness at the misfortune of others. Well, this is where Democrats are going to the bank here with Eric Cantor's defeat. Nancy Pelosi was asked about this, and she said, "I have as much concern for him as he would have for me." And she sort of laughed at that, and other people said, she said, "Wait a minute, I'm being serious here." So, you know, Democrats are kind of reveling in this, but at the end of the day, it comes down to knowing your district. Pelosi says you leave your home fires burning, you know every blade of grass in your district, and some people say that, you know, Eric Cantor didn't do that. He didn't do his homework. I asked House Speaker John Boehner earlier. I said, you know, he had a bit of a competitive primary. He was on the air early. He had some very slick ads. He won in a three-way race with 71%. You had a very different dynamic here in Virginia with Eric Cantor. And probably the most interesting thing I've heard came this afternoon in a conversation with Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas. He said that voters in Virginia are tired of the status quo. And you've had this one race in this single district where Eric Cantor went supernova that has basically, you know, gotten everybody in the Congress all worried. And sometimes it's because they haven't taken care of business back home. Is it about immigration? Yes, it might be a part of that. Is it the fact that, you know, he's in charge and maybe hasn't been able to effectuate the change? Remember, this is a Republican primary here, and they're looking for people who are, conservative or libertarian.
Chad, you're a genius, and you lost me about 3 minutes ago. But all I remember is the Avenue Q analogy, and that's the one with puppets. So yes. Are these guys just yapping puppets?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that some people will say, you know, look, if you're not actually reflecting your district, if you're not, you know, speaking the voices of your district, you know, and not to take the puppet analogy too far here, but say, you know, you're not speaking for your people, then you're out of touch, and then you're probably not going to win a primary. Then
you're probably a puppet after all. Just kidding with Chad, but I think he raised a very good point. Don't try to assign national trends to this. This was a unique race, and a lot of the so-called mainstream Republican leaders fared just fine, thank you. So are we overanalyzing this?
Well, I think that we did learn something, though, and to pick up on Chad's Avenue Q reference. I mean, Avenue Q is a play about puppets, but also people that didn't have jobs and didn't have lives. They're very cute.
So that says a lot about Chad.
Yeah. But, you know, the thing about it was the issues, though, that he brought up and that he won on were, you know, you had been ignored. You're not making any more money than you were 5 years ago. If you have a job, a lot of you don't have jobs. Your property values are in the toilet. I mean, he basically appealed and said, he doesn't care about you, I do. How many more incumbents do you think are shaking on their shoes today for November? Because they know that's exactly the kind of race that their challengers are going to run against them, and they've got a better shot at it thanks to what happened to Cantor this week than they ever did prior.
Well, you're right, but Larry Wingate, maybe by just virtue of the calendar, some of the big boys have already survived primary challenges. I'm not saying to Chad's point there are still other races outstanding, but it's not as if the Democratic crowd or their Democratic opponents are going to be able to topple them on these issues, or are they? What do you think?
No, I don't think they'll be able to topple them on these issues at all. And I think what you said is absolutely correct, Neil, that we are overanalyzing this. This was a local race. And he messed up, and he knows that he messed up, and all the exit polls say exactly what he did wrong. And it certainly has nothing to do with this White House statement. I mean, I consider myself a pretty typical American, and I just sort of get tired of the we're right, they're wrong from both sides, and it can't always be we're the good guys, we're the bad guys, and making out an entire Republican party to be the bad guys over this one little race.
You might be a typical American. You might be a typical American, but no typical American wears your shirts. That's all I will say, and I admire that about you. But Jonathan, we should keep in mind this disparaging of the Republican Congress, whether it's led by Cantor or whatever you want to say. It's not for lack of effort. They're very productive. They've had better than 900+ bills under their stewardship, and a lot of them just sort of parked on Harry Reid's desk. So Nancy Pelosi could say all of this about their productivity or lack thereof, but they churned out a lot of stuff. It's just that the Senate sat on it.
Well, they've made some efforts, Neil, but I think there's the same sort of transformation going on in the Republican Party as you saw in the Democratic Party after John Kerry's loss. And I think this most recent election and Cantor's being ousted is the best example of that. Larry is, I think, respectfully wrong in this case. It is a local election, but a national platform, and really a national philosophy is built on those local elections. And the fact that Cantor gets disposed by this relatively unknown person who spent a pittance not only solidifies that fact, but also solidifies that big money does not control politics, and he who spends the most doesn't always walk away with the prize.
You know what, really quick, if you notice, I didn't bring up Democrat or Republican in my points on this issue, and that's because this has nothing to do with whether you're a Democrat or Republican. People are fed up, and that is where I think that any incumbent in this country, I don't care what party you're in, has got to be concerned. This is the new reality, the new American reality. We do not have a good recovery. Americans are frustrated. They've had it with both sides.
All right, guys, I want to thank you, Chad. I want to thank you for being your brilliant self. It's always good. He is scary smart, isn't he? It's like really scary.
He sends a lot of great emails.
And he could bring Avenue Q into this. Who else but our Chad could do that? By the way, any comments on this, please send them in. We'd love to hear from you. Remember, you got to end it with hashtag Cavuto, not hashtag Avenue Q, not hashtag what the heck were they just talking about. It's got to be hashtag Cavuto. We will share them with the world, but you better be nice, because it's just going to get ugly. That's what I'm saying. Meanwhile, everyone's getting hacked, right? Everyone is vulnerable to someone sneaking in and just hitting you with a virus and hitting your business, hitting your customers. There ought to be insurance for that. Well, there is. In fact, it's big. Are you buying? The CEO is offering.
Did you know your blood vessels are as long as the U.S. oil pipeline system? These pipelines represent the heart of America's energy infrastructure. The Alerian MLP ETF provides access to the 25 leading energy infrastructure MLPs that operate these pipelines, storage facilities,